everybody, Barrett with Salty Dog Performance. I know it's been a while, but I've been pretty busy working on other people's skis, and my main job that I have has been taking priority in my life and some other things as well. But I'm back in the video, and today we're going to be working on something a little different. This is my 2006 Sea-Doo Sportster. It's got quite a few upgrades on it. It runs 65 mile an hour at 8,200 RPM. It's got a larger supercharger, X4 supercharger wheel from Fizzle in it. It's got an OEM 300 horsepower intercooler into it, through-hole exhaust, titanium valve spring retainer, stainless steel intake valves, in-canal exhaust valves on it, exhaust manifold spacer. The engine is completely stock. It has an 0405 engine in it because this is an edition 1. So it has a pretty aggressive OEM cam in it. But everything else as far as rods, pistons, things like that are stock on it. I've actually turned this engine up to 9,000 RPM before. Never had a hiccup on it, but for what I do around here with it, I don't want to have to run it so high in RPM to get the speed out of it. So 65 mile an hour at 8,200 RPM is pretty good, considering these only did about 52 at 8,000 RPM with the stock 215 charger on it. So it's custom to my Riva, and I've had it up and running for 2 years now and really haven't had any issues with it ever. What I have been experiencing here lately is that I can take it out, and right after I get out of the ramp, get it warmed up, go romp on it, and hit top speeds, no problem, hit the RPM that I need to, and not have any hiccups whatsoever. But I've noticed if I take it out and I have it out all day, I have to go through long no wake zones and kind of just putting around with it. When I try to give it a lot of throttle, it'll hesitate on me, kind of surge and power and stuff. And I've just kind of come to the conclusion what it is an intercooler issue. Now, it's not going to be a blown intercooler issue, because if the intercooler was completely bad, then it would constantly do that power surge and stuff. As soon as I put it in the water, that water pressure would build up, the water would be leaking and getting through the throttle body. So I don't think that's the issue here. And we'll show it to you on the bench here in a minute, just how much different the OEM intercooler is from what I'm going to be putting on here, which is actually a Fizzle Supercooler. So the intercooler that I'm going to be putting onto the ski is designed for the 300 horsepower models, and I'm going to be setting it up in the exact same configuration like you would see it inside of a 300 horsepower ski in the way that I put this in here. So it's a fun boat, but like I said, I've just been having that little bit of surging issues, and I've noticed that it's more than likely just condensation building up into it, because these engine bays get very, very, very hot. They do breathe decently. The intake air temps on this thing with the factory intercooler were still basically ambient whenever I'd be full throttle on it, which is really good and really efficient. However, just the construction of that intercooler does build up a lot of condensation, and I'll show you why here in a little bit on the bench. But let's no chatting. We'll go ahead and get over to the bench, show you what I'm going to be working with, and then we'll start putting it into the boat. I do apologize if the camera angle is not going to be that great today. I've got a ski that I've been waiting on parts that's sitting over here behind me, so it's taking up a little bit of space. So whenever you buy one of these kits from Fizzle, I went ahead and got the intercooler with the upgraded hoses. I've been running the OEM hoses with the OEM intercooler. So you open up the box. It's going to be a much larger box than this, but it's going to have your supercharger side, your throttle body side hoses right here. You're going to have 4, and these are really good hose clamps that I've seen he started including with these. These are a lot better than the old ones that you used to get. When you open up the box, you're going to see a piece of heater hose in here, and I'll show you guys exactly what that's going to be for here in a minute. You're going to have your hardware pack here. We're going to have our sacrificial anode. We've got 2 hose clamps here. These are used a 7mm. We've got a 90-degree fitting. We've got a just a straight 1/4-inch barb here, and then we've got our straight fitting. We've got a plug, and then we've got a coupler. And take our intercooler out here. Everything's going to be capped off to keep any dust from getting in there. I would recommend leaving those caps on until you get ready to install everything. So on this one, this intercooler is called the Supercooler because it actually has dual exits on the front. So in the configuration that we're going to run it, we're going to set it up like a factory intercooler. And what I mean by that is like, is the factory 300 intercooler, the exit for the water comes out of the top port on the front side of it. This intercooler is not a, it's not like a directional flow where it goes in, then goes through, and then comes out back through the top. That's not how these are set up. This one is actually just a straight pass through, and the inlet is going to be on the back side. So that's what that 90-degree barb is for. So we're going to put that in, and we're going to have it go out to the back side this way. And then our plug is actually going to plug up this bottom port. Now, like I said previously, this can actually run as dual exits here. So if you were to set this up as a dual exit, water exit to get water out quicker, you would want to run your factory line that goes to your exhaust manifold and everything on the bottom, and then your secondary water outlet on the top. The reason for that is if you run the factory exit up top, you're going to be having water dump out at a much higher rate out of this lower one that's going to be just exiting the hull, and you're not going to get efficient enough water to your exhaust manifold. And I've seen that in data logs of the exhaust. Water temps did rise when it was switched in that configuration. You don't want to run it that way. But I will say this, is that I have tested this on my 300 ski that has a a Z135 Fizzle wheel on it. It's got a Riva cam on it now. It did have a callus cam last year. And I ran it with both the single exit and the dual, and I saw no change in the intake air temps. Now, for you guys that are running a 142 wheel, maybe you'll see some difference in it, but I've not seen any difference with a 135 wheel and cam setup with running a dual exit versus a single. So for the sake of simplicity, running the single is the easy way to go. The good thing is on the 300 horsepower models and the newer skis to be in general, they do have a blocked off bung on the pump support on the back that you just cut off the very face of it, and you'll see that barb on there, and you can run your secondary exit to that. And that's how I had it set up on my ski whenever I tested that out. This is going to be for your bleed off, so for that 1/4 inch barb, where you've got your little 1/4 inch line that comes in and it allows any of the air to escape here. That way you don't have any air pockets that are built up in here. You're going to have full water submersion inside of the core. And this back here is going to be for our sacrificial anode. So I'll show you how to start getting this set up. Now, the way that I run this is I run the 90-degree fitting going this way. So the hose is going to wrap around and come in this way. I have seen people that will route it facing this way, so the hose has to kind of bend off of the pump support, come around and make like a big S. The problem with that is that the hose can actually get kinked, and you don't want to run into possibly starving the intercooler and getting extreme hot intake air temps. So with that hose, and typically you can see I've got some extra hose here, it's already shaped and it's rounded, so it's just easier to run back around to the backside like that. So this is not required. I just do it because it's the way that I want to do it. You know, we've got aluminum, we've got brass here, they're dissimilar metals, you know, any kind of corrosion or anything, but I've just got like some pipe thread sealant, and you do not have to use a whole lot of this at all. I mean, just put a very little bit on the threads of your fittings here. Just put it on there. There might be some excess that comes off the back. It never hardens or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about it like locking it up and not being able to take one of these fittings off in the future. But it does help to keep down on the corrosion and help seal it. They're all MPT, so I've seen people do these without putting any kind of sealant on them, and they don't leak. And again, you're not required to do this. You can use Teflon tape if you want. Again, I personally don't like to use Teflon tape for this stuff. I like to use this. It's just pipe thread sealant. So I'm just gonna show you how to do this one here. We're just gonna take a little bit of it, and again, you don't have to use a whole lot. We're just gonna be putting it on these bottom threads. You don't need to run it all the way to the top because this is an MPT fitting, and we're not going to be able to screw this all the way in. If you try to force this and screw it all the way in, you're going to end up stripping something out. So really the only first 3 threads on this are the ones that really need any of this. You just take it, start threading it in, and you'll start to see the pipe thread sealant is starting to kind of push out already on it. Now once you get it by hand, again, these do not have to be overly tight. They're NPT. For this one, because we can't get a wrench like just a standard socket or something on it, we're going to use a wrench. Put it on our back side here. You will turn, and I typically, after hand tight, go back around, do it like twice. And that's it. So again, you don't have to take these in super tight. You can see how much torque I had to put on that to get that in there, and that's good to go. We'll flip it around to the front. We're going to put our plug on the bottom one. These are 22 millimeter. I'm sure there's going to be some people that say you don't need to use the pipe sealant, you should use anti-seize or whatever. This is the way that I do it. I've had absolutely no issues of doing multiple of these. Not a problem whatsoever. 22-inch socket here. About as tight as I can put it. Then we'll take our straight fitting. That one's going to go on the top here. Good. We're going to take and put our little 1/4-inch barb over here for a vent. I have to remember the size for this, so sorry, I'm not going to edit this out. I'm going to go over to my toolbox and so if I remember what size I need. Let's see what we got here. 14. Okay, cool. My memory's not as bad as I thought it was. So 14 on this guy. This one will go in until it's pretty much flush. We're still 14 on our sacrificial anode, same thing here. Once you've got all those in, if you want to, just take a little rag right here, wipe off any of the excess pipe thread sealant that you've got. So that's how it's going to look once you get everything set up, and we're going to be ready to go put it over into the boat real quick. Okay, so now that our intercooler is completely assembled, I just wanted to show you guys what this additional piece of hose, this barb and these two clamps are for. What this is for is typically your factory inlet feeds to here, right? Well, obviously we're not going to be able to use the factory hose to extend over here because it's short. So what Fizzle does is he includes a separate piece of hose that you can use this barb to join it to your factory hose, and then you've got 2 clamps, and that'll extend it around to the back of the intercooler. Me personally, I don't do it like that, just simply because I don't want to have, you know, multiple hose clamps over here that I have to worry about making sure they're tight. I mean, the likelihood of these ever breaking or coming undone is slim to none, but it also prevents me from having additional metal that could be bouncing up and down and hitting a hose or rubbing up against the intercooler. So what I do is I just go out and go get additional hose, and I'll run one single piece from the pump support that'll run around here. That way it's nice and clean. I don't have multiple points of possible failure or more clamps and stuff that I have to be responsible for than hitting anything. So that's just how I do it. So I'm not going to talk any more about this. Everything's set up. I'm going to leave these caps on here until we get this into the boat. We'll go over to the boat, open it up, and show you how to remove the factory one. Okay, so as you can see, the boat's set up a little bit different, but I do have this OEM intercooler sitting in here exactly like it would be in a 300 model or even a 230. It's got the 300 hoses on it from the factory. It's got the foam cooler block over here. The only thing that's different is the way that I have to have this strapped in. On your 300 or 230, you're going to see 2 straps that run across the top and run into the floor. That's just not how I have it set up here. But we are going to use an 8mm. We're going to go ahead and loosen up our throttle body hose clamp. Loosen up the one on our supercharger. Take our 1/4 inch here, loosen our vent hose clamp. Get that out of the way. Loosen up our water inlet here at the bottom. Water exit at the top. You can see I've got a zip tie here. This is my throttle cable. It runs underneath, and I've got it zip tied to that. So you're not going to see that inside of your 300. And now, once I've got all that out of the way, I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect those. Take the strap off. And this is how you would do it inside of your 300 as well. You can take this entire thing out, take the intercooler out, with the hoses and everything still attached to the intercooler. Just lift it up and out. So now that we have the OEM intercooler out, on this boat in particular, you can see this hose right here. It's running back to the pump support. That's the hose that I'm going to have to take off, and we're going to have to actually cut to fit the line that's going to feed the intercooler on the back side. So that's just a 1/4 inch over there. In your 300 hull, you'll be able to see exactly where this goes to, and it just goes down into a T-fitting over on the other side in the bottom of the hull. All right, so I've got the factory intercooler here sitting next to the Fizzle, and they're about the same size. The Fizzle is a little bit shorter, but this has a denser core to it. The main difference between the two is that the core inside of this one is a tube and fin, whereas this one is a bar and plate. So bar and plate is just known to be much better at dispersing heat. You know, overall for intercoolers, this is just the way to go. They are going to be more expensive. It's cheaper to manufacture with a tube and fin, and most of your automotive, like your cars that you get from the factory that have a an intercooler on them, are going to be tube and fin, not bar and plate. So one of the main things too is that you can hear just how thin this one actually is. So this is all, you know, aluminum stock. These are formed. The flanges are welded onto the front. These are cast in one piece. The front and the back are both cast, and then everything's welded together. So this thinner construction like this is going to be more susceptible to outside heat as well, which is what is causing a lot of the condensation in here. Because like I said, that engine bay gets really hot regardless of what the intake air temps are showing, I'm not really sure of. It's kind of interesting, okay? Like the skis will typically have a much higher intake air temp than I've ever seen on this boat, but just checking this out, whenever I took the intercooler out and dumped it out, I had a lot of condensation in here, and I know it's condensation. I tasted it, so it wasn't salt water, so it's not leaking. It is condensation being formed in here, and I've never had that problem with one of these. So again, with the amount of power that I'm running out of that boat, what I'm trying to achieve with it and have consistent results, this worked okay on a 255 charger. Never had a problem with it, or 260, 230 horsepower, whichever one you want to reference. But once I went up to the X4 wheel with the bigger injectors and started squeezing more power out of it, is when I started to notice I was getting a lot more condensation in it. So this thing is just going to go up on the shelf. It's still a good usable unit. The core is clean on it. There's no saltwater intrusion or anything like that on it. It's still a good backup in case I ever have one fail. I need to throw it in there, or if anybody needs an intercooler, I've got it here. And now we've got the upgraded puppy here, and we're going to take it out on the water this weekend to see how it's doing in this heat. And I'll kind of compare it to some logs that I've got on that one as well. One thing that I noticed is earlier too, I said I was going to reuse the factory clamps, but I did notice that these weren't very tight when I took them off. And I mean, I tightened them down really good. And another thing I noticed too is that they made some pretty large indentions and stuff on the factory hoses. Well, now that I've got these nice silicone hoses over here, I don't really want to do that to these. So what I'm going to do is use the Fizzle clamps, because you can see on the inside of these, they're smooth all the way around. They're not punctured through. They don't have this sharp little edge right here. It just seems like a more evenly distributed, where we're not going to have so much tension on one spot on it. One thing that you do want to note is that there's going to be two different sizes for these. You're going to have two that are a 3X or 80 millimeter, and then two that are going to be 90 millimeter, or the 4. So the 4s are going to go onto the inlets. On the inlet and the outlet of the supercharger. They're going to go on the inlet and the outlet of the intercooler, and then the smaller ones are going to go on the supercharger and the throttle body. So let's go ahead and get this thing. We'll take some of the hose that I've got here, take the factory clamp and hook it to it, lay this out into the engine bay, and then cut our hose to where we need to. If you guys don't have one of these to cut your rubber hoses or PEX hose or anything like that, you need to get one. It's just a quick snip. No razor blades, no scissors, no anything like that. Put it in, cuts it right off, cuts a nice clean cut on it as well. So I would recommend picking up a pair of these if you're going to be cutting a lot of hose and a lot of rubber hose. So go ahead and put this in. Like I said, I'm going to put this hose on the back here, cut my hose out to what I need to, and then we'll go ahead and start working on getting the new silicone hoses on, getting everything put back together inside of the boat. All right, so everything's back in. Sitting back in our factory location, just like it would on a 300. So appreciate you guys watching. I know it was a little bit lengthy, but I do like to be very descriptive so you guys know what you're getting into, what kind of products you're buying, why things are the way that they are on certain things you might have a question about. And if you guys have any questions, just leave a comment. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.